Namaskar, world, and welcome to the Medical School Podcast. The class is in session. Today, we're tackling something really crucial. It's all about understanding floods and, maybe more importantly, how to prepare for them. This is vital stuff for public health, for safety.
It really is. Floods are, consistently ranked among the most devastating natural disasters we face globally. They impact millions every single year. So our goal today is to really break down the information we've gathered, pull out the key insights, and hopefully equip you, the listener, with knowledge that can genuinely minimize their impact.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting right at the basics, because I think we all think we know, but what exactly is a flood?
Oh, at its core, it's pretty simple. It's an overflow of water onto land that's normally dry. Basically, water getting out of its usual place, like a river spilling its banks or a lake overflowing, even a drainage system getting overwhelmed and spreading out where people live or farm. Water going where it usually doesn't.
And what usually triggers this, we always hear about heavy rain, obviously, but what else causes land to get, well, waterlogged like that?
Heavy rainfall is definitely the main driver, you're right. When you get a lot of rain over a short time or steady rain for days, the ground just can't soak it all up anymore. It gets saturated. Then that water has to go somewhere, right? So it pools up or rushes into rivers, making them swell. But it's not just rain. You can have catastrophic floods from dam breaks or levee failures. Those are man-made structures holding back huge amounts of water if they fail.
Instant disaster.
Exactly. A sudden, massive release of water. And then there's rapid snowmelt, too, especially after a really snowy winter. Temperatures shoot up, all that snow and ice melts fast, and boom, rivers can't handle the sudden surge.
So it's not just that it floods, but how quickly it happens seems really important. That must make a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely critical. That speed difference, it's literally life and death sometimes. Some floods, like a big river slowly rising, might develop over days.
Yeah.
That gives people time, time for warnings, time to grab their emergency kits, secure their homes, get out safely.
But then there are the other kind.
Then you have flash floods. Think of them like a surprise attack by water. They happen incredibly quickly, maybe just minutes or a few hours after intense rain or that dam break we mentioned. There's often almost no time to prepare or escape. That suddenness, combined with the really powerful, fast-moving water, makes them exceptionally dangerous. And just to give that some context, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they consistently point out that floods are the #1 most common, most widespread weather-related natural disaster in the U.S.
Wow. Most common and widespread. That's significant.
It really underscores the scale of the problem.
That speed difference, slow versus flash, is definitely key. Let's maybe dig a bit deeper into all the different things that contribute. Beyond just rain falling from the sky, what else is going on?
Well, it's often a mix of things, isn't it? They're usually interconnected. Like with heavy rainfall, it's not just how much rain falls, but how fast it falls. If the drainage system, whether it's a natural riverbed or, city storm drains, just gets overwhelmed by the sheer volume coming down too quickly.
It has nowhere else to go but up and out.
Precisely. It overflows. And river floods, the ones that develop more slowly. They often happen after prolonged rain across a huge area, maybe hundreds of miles upstream. The whole river basin gets saturated, and eventually the river just swells over its banks, sometimes flooding massive areas downstream, farms, towns.
But those dam failures you mentioned sound particularly terrifying.
They are, because they can release just immense quantities of water almost instantly. It's like a wall of water hitting everything in its path. Can completely change the landscape in minutes.
And something you touched on earlier, which I find really interesting, is how we sometimes make things worse through development. How does urbanization fit into this picture?
That's a really crucial point and often overlooked. As cities grow, we replace natural ground soil, grass, trees with hard surfaces, concrete sidewalks, asphalt roads, building roofs.
Stuff water can't soak into.
Exactly. Natural ground acts like a sponge, right? It absorbs rainwater, lets it seep in slowly. But these hard, impervious surfaces, they repel water. So all that rain that would normally soak in becomes runoff, fast-moving surface water.
And that overwhelms the drains.
It massively increases the volume and speed of runoff, dumping way more water into storm drains and natural channels than they were ever designed to handle. This makes flooding much more likely, especially in built-up areas, even places that maybe didn't flood much before all the development.
So we have different ways floods happen. Can we categorize them, like different types?
Yeah, it's helpful to think about the different types. We've mentioned flash floods, the rapid onset, super dangerous ones. Then there are river floods, more gradual, usually maybe taking days to peak, but they can last a long time and cover huge areas. Coastal floods are another big one. Think storm surges from hurricanes or major coastal storms, sometimes combined with high tides. The ocean water literally gets pushed onto land.
Flooding coastal towns.
Right. And then there are urban floods. This is specifically about rainfall, overwhelming drainage systems within a city. It might not even be near a major river. It's just too much rain falling on too many hard surfaces, and the drains simply can't keep up. Pure infrastructure overload.
That breakdown really clarifies things. But now let's connect this to the elephant in the room, really. Climate change. How is this massive global shift making an already bad problem even worse?
Yeah, you really can't talk about flooding today without talking about climate change. It's a major, major amplifier. The basic science is pretty straightforward, unfortunately. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. Simple physics.
Like a bigger sponge in the sky?
Sort of, yeah. For every degree Celsius the planet warms, the atmosphere can hold about 7% more water vapor. And that doesn't just mean it feels more humid. It means when storm systems do form and release that moisture, there's potentially a lot more water available to fall as rain.
So heavier downpours.
Exactly. More extreme rainfall events. What might have been a normal heavy shower 50 years ago could now be a truly torrential, flood-inducing downpour because there's just more moisture up there to fuel it. And it's not just the rain. Climate change contributes in other ways, too. Melting glaciers, for instance, that's adding vast amounts of fresh water into the oceans. Combine that with thermal expansion, water literally expands as it warms up, and you get rising global sea levels.
Which makes coastal flooding worse.
Significantly worse. Higher sea levels mean storm surges don't need to be as strong to cause major flooding. Coastal communities become much more vulnerable, much more often. Low-lying areas that rarely flooded before might start seeing regular tidal flooding.
So this isn't just a future prediction, it's happening now.
Absolutely. This is current reality. And organizations like the World Health Organization, the WHO, are sounding the alarm. They're stressing the urgent need for communities everywhere to adapt. It's not enough to just be aware anymore. We need to actively build resilience against these increasing, often more intense flood events. It's a global challenge requiring action at every level.
Okay, so moving from those big global forces down to the individual level, this is where it gets really practical, maybe even a bit scary, but so important. Knowing your personal risk. How do you even figure out if you live in a flood-prone area? It's not always obvious just looking around.
That's the first critical step, isn't it? And you're right, it's not always obvious. You might live somewhere for years and never see a flood. The best starting point is usually your local government. City or county planning departments, the emergency management office, sometimes even the local fire department. They often have detailed flood maps based on historical data and hydrological studies for your specific area.
Are there other resources?
Definitely. Organizations like the American Red Cross often provide flood maps too. Many are available online now. These maps show designated flood zones, areas known to be at higher risk. And sometimes it's about geography. For example, in Nepal, the Terai region, the low-lying plains in the south, is known to be especially vulnerable.
Why is that?
It's just basic geography. Being low-lying means water naturally collects there during heavy monsoon rains. Plus, you get runoff from the Himalayas swelling the rivers. So understanding your local context, are you near a river, on the coast, in a low spot in the city, downstream from a dam? That's step one in personalized preparedness.
Right. So once you know your risk level, what's next? That emergency kit everyone talks about, what really needs to be in it and why?
Okay, the emergency kit. It's not just a checklist item. It's genuinely your lifeline if you're cut off. You need enough supplies to keep you and your family going for at least 3 days, maybe even longer if possible.
Water seems key.
Absolutely paramount. Clean water. Aim for at least 1 gallon per person per day. That's for drinking and basic sanitation. Dehydration hits fast. Then non-perishable food, stuff that doesn't need cooking or refrigeration. Canned goods, energy bars, dried fruit, peanut butter. Things that will keep you fueled.
What about light and information?
Crucial. A flashlight with plenty of extra batteries, even better, maybe a hand crank or solar-powered one. And a radio, battery-powered or hand crank, ideally one that can pick up NOAA weather alerts. If the power is out and cell towers are down, that radio might be your only link to official information. A good first aid kit is non-negotiable. You need to be able to handle minor injuries until help can arrive.
And paperwork seems like that could easily get lost or ruined.
Very important. Copies of important documents, IDs, insurance papers, birth certificates, deeds, or leases. Keep them in a waterproof portable container, even better. Have digital copies stored securely online, in the cloud, or on a USB drive you keep in the kit.
What about medications?
Critical for many people. If you take prescription medications, especially for chronic conditions like diabetes or heart issues, you need at least a week's supply in your kit. Pharmacies might be closed or inaccessible. The CDC actually has really detailed lists online, suggesting things like whistles, dust masks, garbage bags for sanitation, a manual can opener. It's worth looking up their full guidance.
Okay, so kit sorted. What about the house itself? If you know you're in a flood zone, are there things you can do to make the building safer?
Yes, definitely. Especially if you're in a high-risk area, there's some smart modifications. One big one is elevating critical appliances.
Like what?
Your furnace, water heater, electrical panel, washer, dryer, getting those up on platforms, or maybe moving them to a higher floor if possible, can save you thousands in damage. But it's also a major safety issue. It reduces the risk of electrical shorts and, worst case, electrocution if floodwaters reach them. Aim to get them above the predicted flood level for your area.
That makes sense. Any plumbing tricks?
There are. Installing backflow valves on your sewer lines is a really good idea.
How do those work?
They're basically one-way gates. If the city sewer system gets overwhelmed by floodwater and starts backing up, these valves automatically close. It stops sewage and contaminated floodwater from coming back up through your drains, toilets, showers, prevents a truly disgusting and unhealthy situation inside your home.
Ugh, definitely want to avoid that. What about planning for the people involved, family, pets?
Absolutely essential. A detailed family evacuation plan is a must-have. And don't just talk about it, practice it. Decide where you'll go, a friend's house on higher ground, a designated shelter. Figure out how you'll communicate if you get separated. Local phone lines might be jammed or down, so pick an out-of-state contact person everyone can check in with. Assign roles. Who grabs the kit? Who gets the pets ready? Who locks up? Know your community's evacuation routes and practice driving them. Don't rely on GPS during an emergency. Know the way yourself.
And pets are part of the plan, right?
Yes. Plan for your pets. Make sure your emergency kit includes their food, water, medications, leash, carrier, and vaccination records. Remember, many public shelters don't allow pets, except service animals, so you need to identify pet-friendly options beforehand.
Good point. What else falls under planning? Information, maybe?
Staying informed is key. Know how you'll get official updates. NOAA weather radio is excellent. Local news, official emergency alert systems on your phone. Don't rely on social media rumors. Keep those important documents secure and accessible, maybe in that waterproof container we mentioned. Basic first aid training for family members is also a great idea. Knowing how to handle basic injuries can be vital if emergency services are delayed. And again, those digital backups of medical records, IDs, insurance, invaluable if the physical copies are lost.
These are all really concrete actions people can take. Now, shifting back to information, we hear flood watch and flood warning. They sound similar, but I gather the difference is crucial.
Hugely crucial. Knowing the difference dictates your actions. A flood watch means conditions are favorable for flooding. The ingredients are there, heavy rain expected, rivers rising, etc.
So watch means pay attention, get ready.
Exactly. It's your heads up. Time to review your plan, check your kit, fuel up the car, secure outdoor stuff, and stay tuned for updates. Be prepared to act if things escalate.
And a warning.
A flood warning is much more serious. It means flooding is either imminent and about to start, or it's already happening nearby.
Okay, so warning means take action now.
Yes, this is go time. If evacuation orders are issued, you need to leave immediately. Don't wait. Follow the instructions from local authorities, police, fire, emergency management. They have the latest ground-level information on what's happening and where it's safe to go. Don't second-guess them. Your life could literally depend on it.
That distinction is crystal clear. All right, let's move into the event itself. The water is rising. What are the absolute priorities for safety during an active flood? We hear terrifying stats, like just 6 inches of moving water.
That 6-inch rule is chillingly accurate. Just 6 inches, barely above your ankles. But if it's moving with any force, it can knock an adult right off their feet.
And cars are even more vulnerable, right?
Absolutely. 2 feet of moving water, which doesn't sound like that much, can float and carry away most vehicles, including SUVs and trucks. It's about buoyancy and the force of the water hitting the underside and sides.
Which is why the mantra is, turn around, don't drown. Why is walking or driving through floodwater just so incredibly risky?
Because you have no idea what's under the surface. The water is often murky, full of sediment and debris. There could be hidden dangers. Open manholes creating suction, down to power lines, electrifying the water, sharp objects like glass or metal. The road itself might be completely washed away underneath, leaving a sudden drop-off. You just can't see the depth, the current strength, or the hazards. It's playing Russian roulette.
Okay, so avoid the water. What else should people do if they're caught in a flood situation?
First, keep monitoring official sources for information. NOAA radio, local emergency broadcasts. Know what's happening around you. If you're trapped in your home and water is rising, get to the highest level possible. Second floor, attic. If absolutely necessary and safe, maybe the roof, but only as a last resort, and let rescuers know where you are. Avoid enclosed spaces like attics unless there's an escape route to the roof, as rising water can trap you. Never hide in a basement.
What about utilities power? Gas.
Turn them off only if you can do so safely, meaning you are not standing in water when you touch the breaker box or gas valve. If there's water around, leave them alone. The risk of electrocution or causing a gas leak explosion is too high. Avoid using any electrical appliances during a flood.
And looking out for others.
Critically important. Check on neighbors if you can do so safely, especially the elderly, people with disabilities, or families with young children. They might need help evacuating or signaling for rescue. Community resilience starts with looking out for each other. Helping others reach safety or notifying emergency services about vulnerable individuals can save lives.
So the floodwaters finally go down. It looks like the danger is over, but I understand the aftermath brings its own set of serious risks.
Absolutely. The danger is far from over just because the water level drops. Post-flood environments are hazardous in many ways. First and foremost, that leftover floodwater is highly contaminated. Assume it's toxic. It's likely mixed with sewage, chemicals, fuel, waste, everything imaginable. Avoid contact as much as possible. If you must enter areas with standing water for cleanup, wear serious protective gear, waterproof boots, gloves, eye protection.
And the cleanup itself. The house might be standing, but
Cleanup is a massive job, and health risks are high. Mold is a huge concern. It can start growing within 24 to 48 hours on damp surfaces. Mold spores can cause serious respiratory problems, allergies, asthma attacks. You need to dry everything out as quickly as possible. Open windows, use fans and dehumidifiers if power is safely restored. Clean affected surfaces thoroughly with appropriate disinfectants like a bleach solution following safety guidelines. Discard anything porous that can't be completely cleaned and dried, like carpets, upholstered furniture, mattresses.
what about structural safety or utilities after the fact?
Crucial checks before you reoccupy or fully use the house. Look for structural damage. Cracks in the foundation, warped floors, sagging ceilings. If you suspect major damage, have it inspected by a professional before staying there. And gas leaks are a serious risk. Floodwaters can shift pipes or damage appliances. If you smell gas or hear a hissing sound, get out immediately and call the gas company from outside. Don't turn lights on or off. Don't use phones inside. Also, have the electrical system checked by a qualified electrician before turning the power back on, especially if wiring was submerged.
So protective gear during cleanup is essential.
Non-negotiable. The CDC emphasizes heavy-duty gloves, waterproof boots, eye protection, maybe even respirators if mold is heavy or you're handling hazardous materials. There's debris, sharp objects, contaminants. Cuts and scrapes can easily get infected in that environment.
And food and water still need careful handling.
Definitely. Don't assume tap water is safe until officials explicitly say so. Continue to boil water for drinking, cooking, washing dishes, brushing teeth, or use bottled water. And be ruthless with food. Throw out anything that might have come into contact with floodwater, including canned goods if the seals look compromised, and anything stored in refrigerators or freezers if the power was out for extended periods. When in doubt, throw it out. Foodborne illness is a real risk.
And personal health vigilance continues.
Yes. Keep watching for any signs of illness, diarrhea, stomach cramps, fever, rashes. Pay close attention to wound care. Keep any cuts or sores clean and covered to prevent infection from contaminated environments. Seek medical attention promptly if you get sick or a wound looks infected.
It's really striking how these physical events trigger such a wide range of health problems long after the water's gone.
It's a cascade effect, absolutely. The immediate injuries are just the start. The longer-term health impacts are significant and varied. We talked about waterborne diseases. When sanitation systems fail and water sources get contaminated, you see spikes in things like cholera, typhoid fever, hepatitis A. These can spread rapidly in post-flood conditions, especially where clean water and hygiene are compromised.
And bugs become a problem too.
Big time. Vector-borne diseases. All that standing water left behind is a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. So, in areas where diseases like dengue fever, malaria, West Nile virus, or Zika exist, you often see a surge in cases following a flood. It's a major public health challenge.
And beyond the physical illnesses, the mental toll must be immense.
Profoundly so. The mental health impacts are often the longest lasting and hardest to address. People lose their homes, their possessions, sometimes their livelihoods, even loved ones. The trauma of the event itself, the stress of displacement, the uncertainty of the future, it leads to significant increases in anxiety, depression, PTSD. Children are particularly vulnerable to the long-term emotional effects. Recovery isn't just rebuilding houses, it's rebuilding lives and supporting mental well-being, often for years.
This really underscores the absolutely vital role of healthcare professionals throughout this entire process, doesn't it? They're involved at every stage.
They truly are. Their role is incredibly multifaceted, stretching from well before the flood hits to long after the recovery begins. Before the disaster, it's about preparedness, education. Healthcare providers can educate communities on risks, help people prepare health-wise, promote first aid training, and ensure that medical facilities themselves are prepared with emergency supplies, backup power, and contingency plans.
And during the chaos.
During the flood, they're on the front lines, treating injuries, cuts, falls, hypothermia, near drownings. They're often involved in distributing clean water and teaching basic hygiene to prevent immediate outbreaks. A critical, often overlooked role is ensuring continuity of care for chronic conditions. People with diabetes needing insulin, dialysis patients, those with heart conditions. Disruption in their care can be fatal. Healthcare workers strive to maintain that care under incredibly difficult circumstances.
Not after the waters recede.
After the flood, the focus shifts. Preventing disease outbreaks through surveillance and public health measures becomes key. Providing mental health support is absolutely crucial. Counseling, support groups, recognizing the signs of trauma, and they assist in long-term rehabilitation, both physical therapy for injuries and ongoing support for chronic conditions or mental health challenges. We're also seeing innovation here. Mobile medical teams and telemedicine are becoming increasingly important, especially in getting care to remote or cut-off areas. They can provide immediate treatment, consultations, and prescriptions when traditional clinics are inaccessible. It's life-saving tech.
Thinking about all those challenges, it raises a really important point. How do we make sure the most vulnerable people in a community are protected? Not everyone has the same ability to cope.
That's a fundamental issue of equity in disaster response. Certain groups face much higher risks and need specific attention. Children and the elderly, for example. Kids are more susceptible to infections, and the trauma can deeply affect them. Older adults might have mobility issues, chronic health problems, or be isolated, making evacuation and recovery much harder. Pregnant women need consistent access to clean water, sanitation, and prenatal care, which can be severely disrupted. And people with disabilities face enormous barriers: physical access for evacuation, reliance on power for medical devices, communication challenges in receiving warnings or asking for help.
So whose responsibility is it to look out for them?
Ultimately, it's a community responsibility. Emergency plans must be inclusive, actively identifying and planning for the needs of these vulnerable populations. It requires neighbors checking on neighbors, community groups organizing support, and official agencies providing targeted assistance. Ensuring everyone's safety isn't just a task for emergency services, it's woven into the fabric of a resilient community.
Let's broaden the lens again. Beyond individuals and healthcare, what about the larger players, government agencies, big organizations like the Red Cross? How do they fit into building resilience?
They are absolutely essential. Government agencies at all levels, local, state, federal, set the stage. They fund infrastructure, create building codes, run emergency management operations, issue warnings, coordinate large-scale response and recovery efforts. Organizations like the Red Cross provide massive volunteer support, shelter, food, blood services, and aid distribution. They bring resources and coordination on a scale individuals or small groups can't manage.
Does participating in community programs help, like drills?
Immensely. When communities actually practice their emergency plans, run drills, participate in preparedness programs, it makes a huge difference. People learn what to do, where to go, who to contact. Responders get practice coordinating. It builds familiarity and reduces panic when the real thing happens. That collective practice directly translates to more efficient response and faster, smoother recovery.
And thinking even broader, what about the environment itself? Can working with nature help reduce flood risk?
Yes, definitely. So-called nature-based solutions are gaining a lot of traction, and for good reason. They can be very effective and sustainable. Planting trees and restoring forests or wetlands is a big one. Trees and natural vegetation act like sponges and anchors. They absorb huge amounts of rainwater, their roots hold soil together, preventing erosion, and they slow down the flow of runoff.
Simple things matter too.
Absolutely. Proper waste disposal. Sounds basic, But trash clogging storm drains and streams is a major cause of localized urban flooding. Keeping waterways clear allows water to flow away as intended. And then there's sustainable urban planning, designing cities with floods in mind. This means more green spaces, parks, rain gardens that can absorb water.
Yeah.
It means using permeable surfaces for parking lots, sidewalks, even roads, allowing rain to soak into the ground instead of just running off into overloaded drains. Working with natural water cycles instead of just trying to pipe everything away as fast as possible.
Okay, before we get to some specific, sobering examples, let's bust a couple of common, dangerous myths about floods. What are things people wrongly believe?
Yeah, myths can be deadly. One of the most persistent is floods can't happen here in my area.
Yeah,
People think because they've never seen one or they're not right next to a river, they're safe.
but that's not true.
Not at all. Floods can happen anywhere it rains.
Ooh.
Intense local downpours can cause flash flooding even miles from a river. Urban development changes drainage patterns. Upstream events can affect downstream areas unexpectedly. Assuming you're immune is a dangerous gamble.
And the other big one seems to be about driving.
Yes, the incredibly dangerous myth. My truck SUV is big enough I can drive through that floodwater. We see this lead to tragedy over and over.
Why is this so wrong?
As we said, just 2 feet of moving water can lift and sweep away even large vehicles. You lose traction, you lose control. And you cannot see what's under the water, washouts, debris, currents. The risk is astronomically high. The only safe bet is to turn around. Don't risk your life and the lives of rescuers for the sake of trying to push through. It's just not worth it.
These myths really highlight the need for accurate understanding. Let's connect this now to the real world. Can you share some examples of recent major flood events? They really drive home the scale and severity of this threat.
Sadly, there are far too many examples, and they seem to be getting more frequent and intense. Look at northern India in July 2023. They had absolutely catastrophic monsoon floods triggered by record-breaking rainfall. Hundreds died. Tens of thousands were displaced. Entire communities washed away. It showed how extreme rainfall, likely amplified by changing climate patterns, can overwhelm even regions accustomed to monsoons.
And Libya was particularly devastating.
Libya, September 2023. Just horrific. Storm Daniel dumped so much rain it caused 2 dams upstream from the city of Derna to completely collapse. A literal wall of water surged through the city, wiping out entire districts. Over 10,000 people confirmed dead, thousands more missing. It was a catastrophic failure of infrastructure meeting extreme weather. We also see chronic issues in places like Brazil and Indonesia. Rapid urbanization, deforestation, and intense rainfall lead to frequent, damaging flash floods affecting millions, constantly straining resources in healthcare systems.
And closer to home, there was a really stark example in Texas recently, wasn't there?
Yes, the Central Texas flash flood in early July 2025. That was a terrifying example of how quickly things can go wrong. The remnants of Tropical Storm Barry unexpectedly stalled over the hill country.
Stalled, meaning just sat there raining.
Exactly. It stopped moving and just dumped incredible amounts of rain in one area. Some places got up to 12 inches of rain in just a couple of hours.
12 inches? That's unbelievable.
It's an immense amount of water. The ground was instantly saturated. The rivers responded violently. The Guadalupe River, for instance, surged over 20 feet. And in one terrifying period, it reportedly rose 26 feet in only 45 minutes.
26 feet in less than an hour.
Almost impossible to comprehend the speed. People had virtually no time to react. The flood claimed at least 69 lives, tragically including 21 children. Dozens more were missing for days, including a group of 27 girls from Camp Mystic along the river.
That's just heartbreaking.
It was. The rescue efforts were immense. Over 850 people needed rescue from rooftops, trees, cars, boats, helicopters, drones. Everything was deployed. And a critical point that emerged was about the warning systems. Even though watches and warnings were technically issued, many people said the alerts came too late after the water was already dangerously high or their escape routes were cut off.
So the warnings didn't match the speed of the event on the ground.
That seemed to be the case for many, yes. It raised serious questions about the timeliness and effectiveness of the alert systems in such a rapid onset event. How do we ensure warnings get to the right people with enough time to actually act? These events, from India to Libya to Texas, they all paint the same picture. Floods are an escalating global crisis. They strike suddenly, powerfully, and the impacts on lives, health, education, economies are devastating and long-lasting. It hammers home that awareness and preparation aren't optional. They're essential for survival.
It's a sobering reality. As we wrap up here, the core message seems undeniable. Floods are a formidable force of nature, and their threat is intensifying.
Absolutely. And the counterpoint to that threat is knowledge and action. Awareness of your risk, solid preparation, the kit, the plan, and knowing what to do before, during, and after. These are genuinely life-saving tools. They empower you to protect yourself and those around you.
It really makes you think. Perhaps the most effective way to combat this growing threat isn't just about building higher defenses, but about fostering a deeper collective understanding and empowering every single person with the knowledge to act, turning widespread vulnerability into shared resilience. Something to consider. This podcast is brought to you by Dr. Rajdeep Bahadur Khatri. If you found this video helpful, then don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe for more content like this. Stay informed and stay healthy.